to St. Pat's, Maynooth this evening for hosting this event. And of course, the whole thing about the advantage of an online launch is that so many more people can join us and attend the event from across the world than might otherwise be available to attend in person. So this evening we've got so many people from the Maynooth family and wider diaspora joining us this evening. So you're all very welcome. Thank you very much indeed for coming. As befits a volume commemorating the 225th anniversary of the college, this really is a showstopper, to borrow a phrase from our friends in the Great British Bake Off. This, in fact, may be the first time some of you will be seeing it. So it's a stunning volume, a beautiful book, and one of which we're all extremely proud. My name is Carol Ann Henry from Messenger Publications. We're the publishers of the book. And I'm just going to give you a short overview of the evening before we start. So we will be together for about an hour this evening. Initially, I will hand over to College President, Reverend Professor Michael Mullaney, who will then pass over to Father Donald Neary, SJ, Editor of Messenger Publications. I will then introduce John Paul Sheridan, one of our co-editors of the book, who will give a presentation, and welcome our two guest speakers for this evening, Professor Chris Morash and Bishop Dermot Farrell. We're absolutely delighted they could attend, and thank you very much indeed. Due to the busy schedule and the number of speakers this evening, we won't be in a position to take questions and comments tonight, but I know that both editors are very happy to engage with people and answer questions subsequently in the coming days. So if anybody has questions, please do feel free to contact either Salvador or John Paul. And now I'm very happy to pass over to Father Mullaney. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And good evening from St. Patrick's College, Maynooth. And welcome to everybody who's joining us online. And I can see the number of participants is rising, 152 and rising, for this very special occasion, the launch of We Remember Maynooth, edited by my colleagues, Professor Salvador Ryan and Dr. John Paul Sheridan. I also welcome the many contributors and all involved in the publication at Messenger Publications, Father Donald Neary, Cecilia West, Carol Ann Henry and Paula Nolan. And our special guest this evening, Bishop Dermot Farrell, my predecessor and of the college, former president, and Professor Chris Morash, former professor of English here at Maynooth University. Every one of you are welcome. I hope you'll indulge me just for a couple of minutes as I share a few of my own thoughts this evening. The commemorative volume, a volume is about institutions like Maynooth, tend by their very nature to follow a pattern, even a predictable and prosaic pattern. But what strikes one initially and forcibly about this volume, We Remember Maynooth, is the variety, the unexpected nature of the contents, the rich diversity of events and people who mirror the history that is St. Patrick's College, Maynooth, that is sometimes colourful and occasionally turbulent, especially over the last 50 years. Any danger of sameness or monotony in this book is dissipated by the personal and highly individual nature and the amazing spectrum of style and subject matter of the contributions. In fact, the unchanging, sometimes severe face of the college, with its stony cloisters and ordered quadrangles, which have for long presented to the outside observer, is mellowed by these pages and subverted by the decision of the editors to commission personal accounts of the individual experiences of student and professor, cleric and lay, academic, administrator, indeed from every walk of life in the college, every dimension of life, upstairs and downstairs. All of this is delightfully captured in this volume. And the result is a captivating insight, sometimes revealing, frequently hilarious, into the human reality of what has been for these same centuries a foundation of national and indeed occasionally of international importance. The very title of the book recalls that of the clerical classic of the old Maynooth, I Remember Maynooth, by Neil Kevin, Professor of English Literature in the college. For a long time, the vade-mecum of past alumni. And this production, being the product of a more agitated age and an epoch of fundamental change, cannot afford the luxury of a similar romantic and genteel sentimentality of the good old days, which Neil Kevin so eloquently captured. We remember Maynooth demonstrates the advantages and achievements of oral history at its best, lively, discursive, revealing, perhaps of little, we might say, historic significance, but certainly historical in the more human sense of the term. The book will especially appeal to a lot of our former students, alumni and staff, cleric and lay, who will find it a treasure trove of revived memories of people and events they witnesses or heard secondhand and now survive on these pages. And a general reader will find flashes of insight into Irish national life, traces too of frustration, pathos, drama, pertinacity, and that may touch our common humanity. Handsomely produced and a pleasure to the eye, this publication is a credit to the professionalism of the publishers and in no small measure to the industry and persistence of its two editors, my colleagues, Professor Salvador Ryan and Dr. John Paul Sheridan. All in all, a credit to all those who conceived it and created it. So on behalf of the college this evening, I wish to congratulate also all the contributors of this work who have saved and preserved so many stories of the people and events in this college that could so easily have faded and disappeared, and that would have been a great loss and a tragedy. We remember Maynooth is a fitting tribute and, I suppose, souvenir of the college's 225th anniversary. And I'm delighted to open the launch of this book this evening. And unfortunately, we can't be all here in person to mingle and chat afterwards or to have a glass of wine or some cheese or something else. But I'm delighted so many of you have joined us, 166 now by the end of my introduction. And we're so pleased that you're with us this evening on this very special occasion. Congratulations again to one and all. And I now pass you over to Father Donal Leary.
Thank you very much, Father Michael, for the welcome. And on behalf of Messenger Publications, I'd like to welcome you all particularly. As Director of Messenger Publications, on behalf of our publisher, Cecilia West, and our staff, I'm very happy that we published this book. I thank John Paul and Salvador for entrusting us with such an important book. It's, I think, the biggest book the Messenger ever brought out, and certainly a change from the pamphlets of many years ago. And I thank them for giving us the opportunity to produce this very special book. Words I got about it in the last week on and off were interesting, informative, at times light and humorous, historical of church and state, and a good tribute to the people of Maynooth, staff and students over the years. On our behalf too, I welcome our speakers, Chris and Bishop Dermot Farrell. I'm glad to recall one or two Jesuit connections with Maynooth, especially Father Peter Kenny, who was Vice President in 1811. They say he was asked to be President, and he said no. He was also asked to be Archbishop of Dublin, and he said no. But he had an influence for the year. And I welcome also Father Tom Casey, who's a Jesuit on staff at present. And I'd just like to say for myself, I have many happy memories of retreats and workshops to the seminarians in the 80s. And I thank Bishop Farrell and the staff when he was president, and the staff over the years for their support and hospitality. But anyway, back to the book. Many, many people are involved in the publishing of a book, and in this one particularly. And may I thank my Messenger colleagues in editorial, sales and management, and marketing, administration and dispatch, and especially our art director, Paula Nolan, for her wonderful design. The history of Maynooth, as we read it, is a tribute not just to the staff, but also to the students. Firstly, to the many priests at present ministering, and I welcome them, some of whom I would know over the years, in Ireland and abroad. and to the lay students who have been so much part of Maynooth since that very big opening to the NUI and to the laity, a very interesting article on that by Mary O'Rourke. So not to delay now, thanks again to Maynooth, and we look forward in Messenger to more cooperation. Thanks for the book, and also to all Maynooth too, and especially at the moment, the outreach of theology for lay people, badly needed. So I say, may the two M's, Maynooth and Messenger, play an important role in the future of the Church in Ireland, as we have done in the past. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks very much indeed, Donal, and before you, Father Malani. So now we're coming to some presentations, firstly by John Paul Sheridan, one of the co-authors of the book. Father John Paul is a priest of the Diocese of Ferns. He joined the staff of St. Patrick's College, Maynooth as Education Programmes Coordinator, and currently lectures in Religious Educations and Catechesis, Liturgy and Children, and Systematic Theology. Our two guest speakers, first of all, Professor Chris Morash, worked for many years in NUI Maynooth, where he founded the Centre for Media Studies in 2003 and was Professor of English from 2007. He is currently inaugural Seamus Heaney Professor of Irish Writing in Trinity College, Dublin. And Bishop Dermot Farrell, Bishop of the Diocese of Ossory, obviously former President of St. Patrick's College, Maynooth, also served on the governing body of NUI Maynooth, Theological Department Irish Interchurch Committee, and as National Director of the Permanent Diaconate. So initially I'll pass over to John Paul, who will in turn pass to Professor Chris and on to Bishop Dermot Farrell. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Caroline. I'll just get a screen for you here. Yeah, and here we go. So what I sort of said that I would talk about was the planning and design of the book, I suppose, from our perspective of myself and Salvador, how we initially envisaged the thing. And this first picture is not in the book, but it's Pugin's designs for Maynooth. And as you can see, those of you who know Maynooth, that his design wasn't executed in its entirety. And it was amazing the difference between sort of what was planned and what came out in the end. And everyone knows we have the most beautiful college of all the universities in Ireland. And it was the same with the book, you know, what we initially envisaged. And when we realized it was getting bigger and bigger, we suddenly realized that we had something quite unique and quite spectacular. These, I just thought I'd show them to you, are some of the early sort of images that we thought that we would use as regards to the book, all of which are, you know, perfectly lovely. But I think the one we chose at the end, that kind of dark kind of red and burgundy, it looks really, really well, and it sort of suited, I suppose, the aspirations of the book. And you know, as it began to grow as a project and more pages, and we were up to 500 and then beyond 500, we sort of realized that it was, as Donald said, something that was going to be quite substantial, a showstopper. To talk about, I suppose, some of the photographs, and some of you will have seen these already, but some of you won't have. So the first place that I went to, I took responsibility for that side of things. And the first place I went to was to the archive of the college. And COVID restrictions notwithstanding, myself and Anna Porter, for whom I am eternally grateful, and for her, you know, sort of just was willing to open anything that we needed in regards to photographs. And also Paula. I'll talk a little bit more about Paula later on. And to find something unusual, the thing about the archive was for every one photograph we used in the book, we could have used 10 others, equally as good, equally as interesting. The two photographs here, one is the field behind Rhetoric House, which at one stage had a ball alley, as you can see there, and tennis courts, and obviously was there for racetrack as well. And then this picture of the handball alleys at the back of the college, and you'll see the spire of this photograph was taken about 1902. And you can see the difference in the stonework between the lower part of the tower and the spire, because it had only recently been finished. We were looking for something that people would find interesting from that point of view. Also, you know, photographs, we were very anxious about photographs that wouldn't have been used before, because, you know, between the tremendous book that Patrick Corish had written for the bicentennial, we wanted to move on from that as best we could and find things that were unusual and interesting and people might find appealing. And there you see photographs from the farm, some of the students as athletes, and then the fire in, we were trying to work out for a while where the fire was, which particular fire it was. And then if you notice on the left-hand side of the photograph, you can just see the corner of one of the chapels of the college chapel. So we figured then it was the fire in Newhouse. One of the things about the college is that, you know, we're used to the big pictures of Maynooth. We're used to the, you know, those iconic pictures of the square and the chapel and things like that. We were looking to try and sort of look at details, you know, details that students would have remembered, or details that, you know, sort of bring out just the sheer beauty of the design. But these are all come from the college chapel, some of the panel artwork, which were beautifully restored at the time of the bicentennial, but also things like this, the floor of the mosaic outside the college chapel, some of the carvings in the college chapel, and even just little details from St. Mary's and that beautiful stone flower that you can see also as well. So, you know, these are details that, you know, some students will remember, but so pulling the thing down very, very close to sort of the way, you know, the college might be seen in a different angle. Paula Nolan, who is the designer, but also the photographer with Messenger, Paula came out and we spent an afternoon photographing and scanning photographs from the archive. And then once we were finished that, we went around the college and I basically said to her, okay, photograph that and this, and what do you think of that? And maybe and she took as many photographs and more herself. And this is St. Mary's chapel, or the Lady Chapel rather, in the college chapel, from a most unusual angle. It's quite stunning. So as well as, you know, these you know, images that will people will remind people of the college, there's a great beauty and art in Paula's photography, and I have a couple more examples a little later on. The other thing was this was if you like, the variety of photographs or images that could be got for one particular thing. This is Haig's, is on the left-hand side, Haig's design for the case for the organ that had been bought by or ordered by Beverungi. And the two photographs, and that comes from the archives from the Russell Library, the two photographs on the top, which we got from the Rafati brothers, one of which has the name of Monsignor Hugh Connolly, President before President Milani, and whose name is on the largest of the pipes, which is always a tradition among organ builders. And then this stunning photograph, I mean, the picture here doesn't do it justice, of the rose window and the rose window and the organ by Stuart McNamara. Then we were also interested in highlighting some of the art, and not just photographs, but looking at art as well. A painting by Jack O'Hanlon, the famous Dublin priest, who was a very well known and very well recognized painter. And then one of the paintings by Sarah Kine from the college collection of Junior House there. And then Susan Durek, who works in the library, did this beautiful lino cut. I saw it in a colleague's office one day and pestered her until she finally came around to doing one for myself. And I thought it was worthy of the book because, again, it's so unusual and it's so different, and it's something a lot of people wouldn't have seen before. The fact that we are celebrating the 225th anniversary of the college, it started out as a seminary college and that, and I just thought these three particular pictures, one by Jack Hanlon, and if you look closely, those who are students or former students of the college will notice exactly where it is. It's the back of St. Mary's, the double doors there with the railing, which is still there, and the walk up towards the Graph. And students, I presume, heading to the chapel. And then this stunning photograph, again, this particular presentation doesn't do justice. The interesting thing about this photograph, and it's probably my favorite of all in the book, is the fact that someone had taken the time and the care to tint every one of those academic hoods right down along. And the one from OD is a beautiful one because it's timeless. I'm sure there are students and seminarians who are lying over their desks in that particular pose as we speak. The other thing was that, and this was very, very important, partly because of COVID, we had a problem, obviously, getting photographs, but also we were very insistent, adamant, as it were, that we would get photographs from friends and from colleagues, from alumni. We got in touch with each of the departments, and anyone we could think of. We said, can you have you any photographs? Is there anything that might be worth putting in? And we came up with a variety. That's a photograph of my class in 1983, the opening of the Science Museum, the first science class with a lay student, and then a photograph that was only taken just a couple of years ago at the student orientation. But then we got some incredible photographs. Regina Richardson sent us that beautiful photographs of Thomas Cabdebo, which many of you will remember, who was librarian here. Stephen Farrell was tremendous. Stephen had a huge collection of most of the photographs for the sports came from Stephen, and then this lovely one of the departure of Monsignor Kremen. And then Bill Tinley found this particular picture of, or had this particular picture of Peter Connolly. And thankfully that picture has now been framed along with one of Barbara Haley of a similar type, and will eventually be hung in the English department. And then Mary Corcoran in the sociology department gave us that photograph of Liam Ryan as he's about to be initiated into tribe in, I can't remember, it's in Lapland, I think, and he's about to take some reindeer milk. And then a casual mention of something to Brendan Devlin garnered us this photograph of Brendan Devlin seated just as he was beginning his time as a lecturer here, his brother Kieran on the right, and then John Hume when John was receiving his master's. Tracy O'Weinig gave us that beautiful photograph of Pádraig Fionachta. Celia and Sophia Haley gave us that beautiful photograph of their mother, Barbara. And then a parishioner of mine, Rita Holmes, that photograph, very deeply personal one of, we remember the Dom Casey baptizing her daughter. So there was just, in a way, sort of, it meant that it made the book, as I said, that bit more personal. Nearly towards the end here, again, this was some of Paula's photography. And this is the stairs at St. Mary's, and then the Reredos is looking back towards the college chapel, and the composition and the beauty of the photographs and how beautifully they actually turned out in the book was wonderful. And the last slide was, I suppose, a particular one for me. Some of you will know that this particular plaque is in the hallway in the President's Arch. And as often as I've passed it as a student or as a member of staff, I never knew what it meant or what its significance was. And so Monsignor Brendan Devlin did a translation, which we put in the book. It was dedicated to the benefactors and the donors from the 1950s into the 1960s, who did a lot of work or who helped in the reconstruction of buildings and repairs at that time. And I suppose for me, it symbolizes many of the things of the book. We look at this, as Michael said, we look at this college, this institution, this historical place, and we're not too sure about it. But what a lot of the stories and what a lot of the accounts do is open that place up for us, open something of the history of the college, open something of the detail of the college. And it was a pleasure. The last thing I want to say was, we took all those photographs and they all went off to Messenger. And last Monday week, I happened to be in Michael's office, and he handed me a copy of the book, and I was just blown away by it. I just couldn't believe how even, the raw material that we had got had become just this incredible piece of work. If I had to say so myself, I suppose Salvador would be of the same mind, but a great deal has come down to, you know, the work that that Messenger, in particular, I want to mention Paul in particular as someone who just had the genius to see it as something terrific. So that's all I really wanted to say. And I will just unshare my screen here and hand over to Chris Morash.
Right. Thanks very much, JP, and thanks Salvador as well for inviting me to do this. I'm honored. I'm also a little bit daunted, I have to say. Launching a book with, at my count, an aesthetically pleasing but logistically daunting 100 separate chapters poses a particular challenge. I think particularly when you have an audience who don't have the benefit of a full table of free wine in front of them to refresh themselves. Enforced sobriety at a book launch imposes certain limits. Now, by my simple calculations, and I have fairly rudimentary mathematical skills, if I were to take 10 minutes here this evening, which is, I think, a reasonable span of time for people who don't have a glass of wine in their hands, and I were to mention all 100 contributions in those 10 minutes, that'd be 10 mentions a minute, or basically one every 6 seconds, which would effectively be a very fast read through the table of contents, followed by, thank you very much. It would be comprehensive, but not very satisfactory. It wouldn't be satisfactory because what we have here is a rich symphony of voices, theologians and scientists, physicists and classicists, musicians and poets, athletes and librarians, monarchs and students, visitors and residents. You know, and really it couldn't be any other way. So I'm going to congratulate every single contributor to this book because, well, first of all, there's so many friends and former colleagues among them, but I'm going to beg your indulgence for not going through this chapter by chapter. That's the job for the reader. And what I will say is when you do read this, you will find that this book is not just a repository of memories. It provokes memory. I found myself reading it and remembering other things that weren't there in the book. But the book itself is also something else. It's more than any one contribution. It's more than the sum of its parts. And that is as it should be. Because if Maynooth is anything, it has always been a place where there's been space for more than one voice. Perhaps more than any other university, certainly on this island, the necessity for dialogue among different ways of seeing the world has been written into the history and the architectural fabric of the university. Some of that's been done in very obvious ways, some of it in less obvious ways. I encountered it through one of the less obvious ways first. When I started work here in 1990, I was housed in the Arts Building, which Peter Denman evokes here with his characteristic dry wit. Now, when I look back at it now, things that seemed only a little bit strange at the time appear remarkable in retrospect. At that time, and remember it's not that long ago, the English department shared an extended corridor with not only the two Irish departments, old and new, as well as philosophy and classics, but also sociology and anthropology. And of course, philosophy and classics, there were members of those departments who had complicated attachments to the Pontifical University. And English and sociology shared a single administrator. In other words, from the threshold of my office, I could see 7 disciplines. It was an impressive vista by anyone's standards. Now, of course, the arts block when I first moved there had other unique features as well, including having the university cafeteria in the middle of it, so that under certain meteorological conditions, you got a kind of thermal inversion effect throughout the building, which filled the corridors with an impenetrable fog that smelled suspiciously like chips and boiled cabbage. On those days, the view was somewhat less impressive. And yet, you always knew that when the fog lifted, there they would be again, the philosophers and sociologists, the anthropologists and the classicists, all talking to one another. And that was remarkable. And the same thing was happening all around the campus in different configurations, although minus the unique atmospheric effects. Now, the old arts block, with its cabbage fog banks, may sound like a curious image of Newman's idea of a university, but it was precisely that. Here's what Newman writes. I have said that all branches of knowledge are connected together, he says. They complete, correct, balance one another. There's no science, he uses the word science for any branch of knowledge. There's no science, but it tells a different tale when viewed as a portion of a whole. from what it is likely to suggest when taken by itself, without the safeguard, as I might call it, of others. I love that phrase of Newman's, the safeguard of others. It speaks to a casual but powerful collegiality, an enforced seeing of yourself among others, of putting your own ways of seeing the world into context and questioning their self-sufficiency. And I think if there's a thread that connects so many of the memories that are gathered here together in this book, this is part of it. It's a kind of warm thread of having belonged to a true community of learning. If I want to try and sum up, I think, something else that this book captures, I would turn to one contribution here that I think introduces a couple of words that are useful for thinking about this. Tom Collins writes about coming to Maynooth in the early 1970s, and as a student being introduced to the work of a very early sociologist, Ferdinand Tönnies, who back in the 1880s differentiated between what he called Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft. Now the former, and I'm paraphrasing Tom here, applies to societies that are characterized by close, personal, face-to-face relationships and a strong sense of communal identity. The latter to societies that are based around formalized contractual relationships and codified systems of duties and rights. Now that transition from a society based around close personal relationships to one based on codified systems of rights and duties, I think could probably describe the journey of Irish public life over the past 40 years. It certainly describes the evolution of our Irish universities. And I think perhaps more than any other, it describes the evolution of Maynooth. The university that I arrived in 1990 was certainly a place characterized by those close personal face-to-face relationships. In the years since, Maynooth has put in place the full administrative apparatus of a 21st century university. And the benefits that have followed from that go much deeper than banishing the cabbage fog from the arts block. They go to all the things that we can look at when we look at the ongoing astonishing transformation of the North Campus, the world-leading research in areas like wireless technology and mapping, and so much more. But at the same time, that older social order, that mirror of Newman's University, had its value as well. So for me, the kind of remembering that this book encapsulates and captures for us is more than simply enjoyable, although it is enjoyable. It has real value. For in allowing us to remember the best of what we were in the past, we can sometimes glimpse the best of what we can be in the future. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll hand over to Bishop Farrell.
Sorry, I was muted. So thanks, Chris. It's a great pleasure for me to be here this evening, to be invited to launch We Remember Maynooth, a college across 4 centuries, a book of recollections to mark the 225th anniversary of the foundation of the college. And I suppose down through the years, several reminiscences of Maynooth have been published. One thinks of one by Kilkenny man and Ossory man, remembrances of Maynooth Professor Walter MacDonald, a kind of, I suppose, an autobiography of sorts, or maybe an apologia pro vita sua after Newman, or one mentioned by Professor Michael Manani, Neil Kevin's memoir, I Remember Maynooth, or Maynooth Remembered Again by Dennis Meehan, about which one member of staff, now deceased, quipped that it added a new and terrible dimension to death. Well, the same can't be said of this evening's volume. Having read through all of the various chapters, it certainly one is not quaking, wishing that one was dead or anything. Of course, the most revolutionary changes that have happened in Maynooth since the foundation have taken place in the last 50 years. I was lucky to be there over most of those 50 years as a student and staff member. The Universities Act of 1997 represents the most significant and all-embracing piece of university legislation passed since the foundation of the Irish state. And I think it's indisputable that most of the significant and far-reaching changes were expressed in Maynooth with the establishment of the National University of Ireland, Maynooth, as an independent institution. That particular change wasn't captured by Paddy Corish's meticulously scholarly bicentenary institutional history of Maynooth. Indeed, you know, reading that particular volume, in dealing with the time period of that last 50, 60 years, he took pretty much refuge in anonymity, and that was probably a deliberate decision on his part. But the authors of this evening's volume, or the editors, eschewing another institutional history, this substantial, it's very well produced collection of essays, it forms part of what I would describe as the contemporary human and social history of the complex institution that is Maynooth, as seen through the eyes of staff and students from all grades and across all departments in the college. The selection of memoirs, there's pen pictures, there's reminiscences, there's sketches and aspects of the college life and history. What they do is they reveal dimensions of the life and the experience. And what you get is the insights of staff and students who lived and worked and studied in the college. The miscellany, if I could use that word, it's part memoir, it's part social history, and maybe even part folk history. For some, it will be an introduction to this historic centre of learning. For others, it's going to be an evocation of memories that they had when they were members of staff or when they studied in the college. Others, it's reminiscences and encounters, and some that describe actual events, and others that, I suppose you might say, delve between the lines of history, offering portraits of characters that passed through the college and people that journeyed with them as they spent time there, either staff or students. And to study the three variables of people, place, and time that all historians are concerned with, the contributors employed not just the standard sources, but also there was a source material almost of unequal diversity. There was diaries, there was correspondence, there was personal reminiscences, there was cartoons, there's drawings, there's snapshots of staff and student life, and many, many photographs, which John Paul has well illustrated. And it was all done with a lot of humor and wit, which made the thing a very lively read and an entertaining read. What comes across in We Remember Maynooth is not just a sense of place, but what you get is a great sense of the social networks that evolved in the college, and indeed in some of the institutions beyond the college where people met. The reminiscence of the authors might be, I suppose, seen as kind of almost like a series of boreholes through the complicated educational, social, cultural, and religious, and the cultural fabric of the past. And it provides a great series of glimpses into that world that was Maynooth down through the ages. The human and cultural and religious history of the college is far, far greater than the institutional history. Because that history, when we look at it, it's sometimes written from the perspective of presidents' reports and other official documents that are preserved in the archives. They do capture a dimension of the institution, but they're certainly not all of it. We remember Maynooth, a college across 4 centuries, its history as seen through the eyes of ordinary people. And sometimes ordinary people are written out of history by professional historians. And this volume, it situates itself in the experience of people who worked in Maynooth, students who studied in Maynooth, visitors who came to Maynooth. And it recognizes that the interaction between the strictly personal and social in community relations is an essential part of any attempt to understand all of the entities that now occupy the Maynooth campus. And there are many entities that now occupy that campus. While these short essays are not confined to any strict notion of what constitutes social, religious, or cultural history, they do greatly enrich our understanding of the modern history of Maynooth College. Contributions, as Chris has outlined, widely range across the spectrum of religious, artistic, political, and academic endeavour. There's no way you could actually go through all of the presentations. It's impossible. They range on essays, interesting essays about the setting up of the Department of French, and Sociology, and the English department, as to things like why the cellar was established. I might add, it seemed to be mainly established to curtail the drinking rather than to encourage it. A little inversion there. The descriptions of Father Dre's cartoons, they're quite fascinating. While he was on the English mission, here he was with his pen and ink producing these beautiful cartoons, and another form of history and capturing something of the life of the college in what was a very dreary period. One late professor described it to me at one stage that went on for 150 years as being like a big sausage machine, year after year, churning out sausages. And things really didn't change very much until we got into the mid-60s. Essays, of course, are enlivened by flashes of humour and deft touches of recondite but fascinating information. We learned, for example, that the first layman appointed a professor in Maynooth in 1975, Tony Farrell, found out about his appointment to the chair of mathematics from a report in the Irish Independent with the headline, Bishop's Act on Unmarried Mothers. The report was really a press release from the Bishops' Conference about the setting up of Cura, and the last line was given over to Tony's appointment. Coincidentally, I was Tony's first student when he came to Maynooth back in that September day in 1975. And he was so young looking in those days that I actually thought he was a student because he arrived on a racing bike, which he dropped at the wall on the way to the classroom. And I asked him, was he a student going to the mathematics course? He said, no, I'm the professor. So I love Larry Taylor's dash of hyperbole about that Maynooth, he says, was the greatest unintended consequence of the British Empire. With the founding of a seminary in 1795, they established the centre of what was to be an Irish Catholic empire that would stretch from Australia to Canada. The tribulations of Brendan Devlin in re-establishing the French department, which was first established in 1801, are recounted by him in great detail. And if nothing else, you should read it just for his interview in 1963 by the redoubtable Archbishop John Charles McQuaid regarding his request for a sabbatical leave. It's a tour de force and a great insight into the mind of John Charles. I also welcome the inclusion of 18 essays that are authored by women, and that's a mark of the college's growing recognition of the vital contribution of women to the college, and it's reflected indeed down over the last number of years in appointments to key leadership roles since the opening of the college to lay students in 1966. It's important that they are written into the mainstream college history. I single out a couple: Mary Corcoran's essay on the joining the quartet of Liam Ryan, Micheál McGrail, another Jesuit who served so admirably for many years in the college, Frenchman Michel Péan, and Tony Fahy in the sociology department in 1990. Or Agnes Nelligan's contribution details the poor state of the library in 1974 when she was asked to start work on the 1st of January, which wasn't a holiday in those days, even though there was no one around, and it took quite a while to get into the library. With the increasing lay student numbers, it would be an understatement to say that she detailed that the numerous problems that she encountered in the library. And one little amusing ditty from that was the realization that with the introduction of lay students, came the realization that an ecclesiastical excommunication was no longer effective to protect the library's books. In fact, even subsequently, the introduction of security men at the door of the library didn't prove entirely satisfactory either. Pat Hannon's A Rumble of Thunder in 1965 recounts the dissatisfaction of students of theology of that particular year. And that's further elucidated in many other ones, but particularly in Taigo Dushlana's recounting that the professor of ecclesiastical history, now deceased, of course, professed a certain sympathy for the students who, instead of exploring, as he put it, the profundities of moral theology, found themselves confronted by a fecking rabbit. I can remember some of that, having sat at the feet of the same professor and having to deal with the same rabbit. I suppose, in the words of Virgil, Forsan et haec olim meminisse juvabit. It is a good thing to remember some of these things. Since the many men and women listed in this work have passed into eternal life, the college that they served has changed in many ways and in circumstances they could hardly ever have thought of. And that's a point, I think, very well captured in the final lines of Pat Hannon's contribution. Referring to the early to mid-1960s, he says, "Things are different now in church and country and world in ways that were unimaginable then. But what happened then was unimaginable in 1795, or when Healy wrote his history 100 years later. Who knows what St. Patrick's College, Maynooth, is to become? What we do know is that the gospel is the same as it was in the beginning, and it is a message of hope." And that's what the college has brought to so many people down through the centuries. It has brought a message of hope to students and staff and to visitors alike. Today, memories are getting shorter, and the past may not mean a whole lot to, or very little to some people. I hope that the contribution of the authors to the life of Maynooth College, that it won't be forgotten. With no expense spared in the book's level of illustration and typographic design, We Remember Maynooth is a visual delight. It's a very fitting celebration of the 225th anniversary. I pay tribute to the dedicated work of the editors, Salvador Ryan and John Paul Sheridan, and commend this excellent miscellany of essays to all who would like to understand the historical development of Maynooth College. For all these reasons, for many others, it gives me the greatest possible pleasure to launch We Remember Maynooth, a college across 4 centuries. If it was a ship, I'd be knocking a bottle of champagne off it. I'm not too sure what you do with a book. I suppose you throw it out there and you give it to the readers to go away and enjoy it. There are 500 pages of absolutely very enjoyable and thoroughly engaging articles. Enjoy every one of them. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Bishop Dermot. Agus tugann sé áthas mór domsa bheithin bhór meascanacht ché go bhfuil méid go léir ag zoomáil más bríthir é sin. Chun an leabhar glóite seo a cheola. Is mór an trúan nach bhfuil méid bailithe le chéile sa bhíolan mór galanta an saithe nuad, agus cuimhnaí an choláiste á go roinnt adrin. Ach sin an saoil mar atá fé láthair. It's a very great pleasure to be here with you all tonight, albeit on yet another Zoom call, to launch this really gorgeous volume. It's a great pity, of course, that we couldn't all be together tonight in Pugin Hall, glass of wine in hand, primed to share with each other so many memories of the college. We really would have had the night of all nights. It falls to me to offer some words of thanks. And I'll begin by offering no apologies whatsoever for calling this a leabhar glóite, a gorgeous volume, for that is what it is. And I'm taking no credit whatsoever for making it so. John Paul and I were very happy to choose Messenger Publications as the right fit for our book from the very start. And it's testimony to the wonderful team at Messenger that we've been able to showcase Maynooth College in this way. They were a delight to work with. They were professional, courteous, and always eager to make this book as fine a production as it possibly could be. Our sincere thanks, therefore, to Donald Neary and to Cecilia West for agreeing to work with us from the outset, and especially to Paula Nolan for the exquisite book design. And indeed, for so many, as John Paul has said, for so many of her own photographs of Maynooth College, which were specially commissioned for this volume. Likewise, one of the members of our own security staff, Liam O'Brien, who went beyond the call of duty so many times in capturing stunning images of the college, including the beautiful image of St. Joseph's Square, which appears on the back cover. Our thanks also to Tony Murray Photography, to Stuart McNamara, and to all others who sent us photographs and allowed us to use them, to those who allowed us to use works of art as well, too many to mention by name. Special thanks goes also to Anna Porter in the college archives, who was enormously helpful to us throughout, and as ever to the college library staff, who were kind enough to give us permission to use a number of images. To all those who permitted us to use literary material in whole or in part for our volume, we'd also like to express to you our sincere thanks. To our president, to Professor Michael Mullaney, who was supportive of our venture from the very beginning, we owe a debt of gratitude. And we'd also like to very gratefully acknowledge a very generous publication grant from the Dalton Fund, which has simply made a volume of this quality possible. A large project such as this would be impossible were it not for its enthusiasts, those who from the get-go really wanted it to happen. The excitement in their eyes every time we spoke about it, propelling us on and giving us perseverance when our weak editorial wills began to flag. You know who you are. And again, you are too many to mention, with the exception of a couple of people. Well, first of all, I want to name one person in particular, and that is Dennis Bergen. Dennis has a great love and loyalty to the college, and Dennis delivered that much needed enthusiasm in spades, as well as contributing several articles to the book. There is one other great enthusiast, however, and that is my co-editor, John Paul, who has always been a delight to work with and whose dedication to making Maynooth College better known has borne fruit in this beautiful collection. And so it remains for us also to thank those who have made tonight possible, to the administrative team here at Maynooth, especially to Tracy Flinter and Carolyn Tennyson, and also the team at Messenger, especially Caroline Henry, who has guided us so efficiently through this evening's proceedings. Last but not least, to Professor Chris Morash and to Bishop Dermot Farrell, who so kindly agreed to co-launch this collection. Both have a long history with Maynooth and a great affection for the campus. Thank you both so much for making yourselves available for tonight's launch, and indeed for your kind and very thought-provoking words. Thank you to those of you who have joined us from so many different parts of the world. We do hope that you'll have the opportunity to enjoy the fruits of our efforts, and that they will recall for you your own time at Maynooth, and will bring back some precious memories. But the memories shouldn't end here. This is, of course, just one book. And maybe departing from script a little, may I take this opportunity. We are at 162 people at the moment who are still logged on. If any of you, and I'm sure there are many of you who are alumni of the college, whenever you were here, many of you may have tucked up in your attics old college notes, old memorabilia, Maynoothsiana of all kinds. Please don't throw them out. Please don't let anyone else throw them out. Give them to us. Please give them to us. The oftentimes it's the things that are most common, the bits of material culture, the little bits and pieces that are most common, that are oftentimes thrown out, because sure, who would want that? what use would it be to people? And of course, the historian in me, who has a great passion for social history particularly, says, please do not. You have no realization of just how useful these things will be. Even some things like college notes. We don't have in our archives a huge collection of ordinary college notes. We just simply don't. And as we all know, it's often the marginalia at the sides of college notes that prove to be the most interesting and tell us so much about the reception of lectures, what was heard, what was not heard, and then what was misheard. And well, let's say these things are lying around in cubby holes and in attics and in boxes all over the country, and maybe indeed all over the world. And I'm going to take this opportunity certainly to ask you please to consider that they are valuable. Not only that, but of course, the recollections of so many of our contributors. So much about Maynooth is contained in the oral history. So many characters, so many people who have passed through this college and what they have brought to this place, so much about their lives is contained in that oral history. Oral history is finite. It lives in the minds and in the retellings of the people who are still alive, but someday it will evaporate, it will disappear. Please do not let that happen. If anything, this We Remember Maynooth volume, I mean, it's only the tip of the iceberg. If it propels anyone else to put a value on these things, to write these things down, to have them recorded, I think it will have done its job. But as I said, the memories should not end here. This, of course, is, after all, just one book and a small selection of memories. It's really a snapshot. And perhaps fittingly, to paraphrase the Gospel of John, chapter 21, verse 25, if you want to look it up, but there are many other memories. If every one of them were written down, I suppose that the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. Garamahagi, Gulir.
Thank you so much, Salvador, for bringing our evening to a rousing rally call to a conclusion. And we are just coming in under the hour. So thanks very much to everybody for that. It was a wonderful evening. Our speakers have given us much food for thought. Some of us have probably brought alumni and former faculty down little avenues of memory lane, bringing back memories of your own time in Maynooth and your own college days. So you'll be delighted to hear that we have recorded the event, and I will send out the link to all attendees and panelists as well once we've uploaded it in the coming days. So you'll be able to watch bits of it again or relive some of those memories. Also, to mark the launch, we're offering a 10% discount on the sale of the book via our website, www.messenger.ie. So if you apply the coupon Maynooth225, easy enough to remember, as you complete the purchase on the website or in an email, if you want to email our staff, I will include that coupon code in the email that I send out with the YouTube link as well. So once again, thank you all very much indeed for a wonderful evening celebrating a marvelous book, and I hope you all enjoy a leisurely read, maybe over the Christmas time, because that's the kind of book it is, really, isn't it, to curl up with. Thank you very much indeed. Good night.